the second step is compassion for others.
Mm.
And the quintessential insight there, the Buddha said compassion is sympathetic joy and sympathetic sorrow. What is the joy over another's joy, and what is the sorrow over another's sorrow? And I remember I was talking to the Jung Institute about the craft of compassion a while ago. And I was speaking very directly about sympathetic joy. My daughter is now pregnant.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, well, that's it. You see that smile on your face. That, my dear, that smile on your face, that is sympathetic joy.
Ah,
the
you
light
just
over
elicited it out of me.
Yeah, well, that's
Yes.
I mean, I told this to this group of people at the Jung Center, and they had kind of more or less the same response you had. And I said, that is the essence of the Buddha's teaching. Sympathetic joy, joy over my joy, you know. And that's the radiant directness of compassion. Sympathetic sorrow.
Sympathetic sorrow, I think, is a vulnerable, painful thing to share with someone.
Oh, yeah.
You have to step out of your comfort zone and your good life and your unwillingness to sabotage your happy moment, and suddenly shift to be available for sharing the moment with someone else. Their sorrow, their sadness, their grief, their loss, their all the things none of us really relish, and yet to feel it with compassion almost seems to liberate you from the reluctance, because you know it's a gift.
Yeah. What I told the Jung Institute, which I will tell you now, is my little brother, it's a family of 6, was psychotic Mormon, and he wandered off to the forest, and his remains were found 4 years later. We didn't know. We didn't know whether he was dead or alive, really, but we kind of presumed he was dead. And
oh my goodness.
On the Day of the Dead, as it was, I went to look for his corpse.
You knew you'd find it, or?
It was found by a deer hunter 4 years later.
Oh my goodness.
And I ultimately went to New Mexico, where he was found, not far from where my mother lived, in the cabin that my grandfather had built. And we claimed his remains, opened up the plastic box, and my mother lifted up his skull and kissed his skull on the pate. And then we had him cremated and we buried him. So we were putting him down next to my grandfather on the ranch. I said, even as you have done so to the least of these, my brethren, you have done so unto me.
Just took me through the other part of that craft, didn't you?
I did, indeed.
You're crafty, aren't you?
I am. How wonderfully alert you are.
How, therefore, does someone learn, if it's not natural, how does someone learn to share someone's joy or to share someone's grief and know that it's a sharing but still remain themselves?
Oh, yeah.
A compassion for oneself.
Yeah.
which often I think we think of as a preservation of oneself.
Yeah.
And here you share with someone else that has nothing to do with one's self-preservation. How do you move into that?
When I teach the craft of compassion, stories such as I just told, those two stories, quintessential, the stories of one's grief and the stories of one's joy. The thing is, that is the place every living being knows sorrow. Every living being knows joy. And is a place of solidarity with living beings. I encourage people to collect these stories. Not only their stories, it could be their sister, you know, or a friend, or a stranger, you know. But it's like gathering medicine for a medicine bundle. And those stories, my father, you know, he died at 52 of congestive heart failure, and I would work at the hospital, and I would see a 50-year-old guy in the cardiac ward, and I'd think, oh, it could be my father. Or I'd work with a young psychotic, saying, well, that could be my brother. You know, and to connect from the heart with those ones, the link of one's stories to those ones, one is relieved of the personalization of what one has gone through. If one personalizes it, one simply becomes narcissistic and boring. I mean, really, when it comes down to it.
It reminds me of what R.D. Laing said, which was he worked with schizophrenic and schizoidally disturbed individuals. And he said, remember always, we are much more alike than we are different.
Precisely.
And,
that's beautifully put. That's exactly the case.
However, you stretch me in your writings to not be comfortable with this second craft, because to extend this type of compassion toward a tormentor, a torturer, an abuser, feels like a singular violation of one's compassion for self.
Yeah.
And to have compassion for quintessential evil, if I can go so far. This twists me when I hear you talk about this, but please address that.
It's hard. Oh, Lord. Talk about that. Oh, what can I possibly say?
Not comfortable, is it?
No, it's very hard.
To have the nemesis in our life be a teacher. To have the nemesis in our life be someone we are grateful for. I work with too many people abused to have to get confused between compassion for their abuser and totally losing their right to stand up, to not be abused. It's so confusing. So somewhere in there is the dance of compassion. And maybe we should move on to the third step. Maybe we find ourselves weaving into a different understanding of this.